It was fine, but it just felt like a 90s movie. But it came out in 2003, and some of it didn't make the most sense. Like how they try and convince you it's Brad. Like some of it's believable. But then they try and convince you that he was the one that hurt Mandy. Even though for some reason they show us him harassing her and messing with her. And then he leaves. And then she's attacked. But the movie went on this 3-minute rant about all the things that point to him being the killer. And you're supposed to believe it. No thanks. This isn't Scream. There's not two killers. So it would make no sense for Brad to be the killer. Instead, it's the character that had little to no screen time. There's this guy Shane. Every time he shows up, he's kind of pushed away. And he actually seemed like a bit of a nice kid. But nobody really was nice to him. Nobody really respected him. He wasn't even respected by his own friends. Shows up, talks to them, and then they eventually shoo him away. He sits at lunch by himself instead of with his friends, which later ends up having him get harassed by the mean popular girl of the movie. Because everybody knows you have to have that if it's a high school movie. Then he has a heart attack and everybody jumps up and watches. And then they eventually are just like, oh, I'm glad that doesn't happen to me. Just some random person says that. And nobody gets mad at them either. They're just like, oh, okay. But apparently that's normal to say. Is that you're glad you don't have heart attacks when a kid's having a heart attack on the floor. At least I think that's what they said it was. And then he doesn't show up again for most of the movie. Until this one scene later in the movie where he talks to the girl for a few seconds. And she eventually kind of shoos him away again. Like, oh, it doesn't matter what I was talking about. Even though she was talking about it in front of him. And then later, it turns out he's the killer. Like, I don't care. You did nothing with him. So, there isn't really a reason to care. The movie ends in kind of a ridiculous way. The little kid of the movie, the 10-year-old sister or whatever, I don't say how old she is, but she looks 10, decides to watch the movie The Wisher, which is what caused all those problems in the first place. Oh, and I forgot to tell you that Shane went insane because he was a bit of a lonely kid. And he just watched a movie over and over and again. He watched the movie 25 times in 1 week. Is what they say, and it eventually made him go crazy. And then they say that he got sent to a mental asylum. So problem solved, right? Sure. But and at the end of the movie, she starts watching the movie, and then we see that there's someone else dressed up like the Wisher. Like, okay. don't care. This movie was mediocre at best. It even kinda calls itself a B movie. Because there's a scene where they talk about The Wisher, and they refer to it as a B movie, even though it's their own made-up movie that they put in this movie. It's part of their plot. And when they refer to The Wisher, they call it a cheesy B movie. Even though this is kind of a cheesy B movie. And, well, there's also a few things like a person dressed up like the Wisher kills people. There's a news article about a guy who kills his sister after watching The Wisher. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense that the Wisher shows up again at the end of the movie. But at the same time, it doesn't. Because most of the news articles were different places. This one is the exact same place, the exact same family, but a different family member. We couldn't have done it to Debbie, or just some, I don't know, that would have been stupid if they did it. I don't know. Not everything has to be a setup for a sequel, though. Especially the endings of the first movie. You don't know if you're gonna get a sequel. Stop making these dumbass cliffhanger endings that are supposed to be scary. Because they're not. But yeah, it was fine. It wasn't boring, but it wasn't necessarily good or necessarily entertaining. It was just fine.